Welcome back to your Heat latest on FanArc. I'm Sam Shapiro. If you haven't checked out Underdog Fantasy yet, only take you 5 minutes. Just stop what you're doing right now. You can actually use this QR code right up here to get started. Download the app today. Browse a number of picks that can make getting in on any sporting event really a lot more fun. The big games right around the corner this weekend. There's a number of NBA games scheduled before All-Star Weekend right around the corner as well. And when you use promo code BasketballFan, you could score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. Thank you to Underdog for sponsoring today's video. Well, I'm just going to say it plain and simple. This sucks. This really sucks for the Miami Heat. Not only did they not win the Giannis Antetokounmpo sweepstake, they didn't win the Ja Morant sweepstake, which, all right, whatever. But they didn't get anybody. They got nothing. Zilch. Zero. Goose egg. What are you kidding me? How do you get nobody? I at least talked about in the last episode how a plan C needed to be worked in and at least get some smaller scale trades going to build a supporting cast to maybe have a better lineup for Giannis Antetokounmpo to come in. And guess what Pat Riley and the Miami Heat did? Absolutely nothing. They did nothing. Terrible. Only team in the Eastern Conference to make 0 trades at the deadline. It's not like we didn't see any other teams not make trades. I think there were 28 trades that happened leading up to the NBA trade deadline. Miami did nothing. I mean, look, Miami has a history of being thrown into the running for many superstars and getting them to come and play. So it's not like this is a surprise, but I'm certainly pissed off that Miami didn't do anything to at least try to maybe make the situation look a little bit better heading into the summer for them. They didn't acquire anything. And to me, to see all the comments dogging Pat Riley online saying Riley's got to go, the biggest reason why I would have understood not going after Kevin Durant this summer was because, all right, we're going to hold off to make sure we have more assets in the future for Giannis. Now we've got the more assets in the future for Giannis. You don't capitalize on it. I mean, drop in the comments if you guys think this ultimately deteriorates any conversation for Antetokounmpo going to Miami being had in the future. Because, I mean, at this summer, looking into this summer, I don't see how Milwaukee's then going to turn around unless Miami magically pulls 3 picks out of their back left pocket or has 2 or 3 guys that they end up signing trading for that would make a package 10 times more enticing for Milwaukee. So at this point, it kind of just seems like Milwaukee's at least going to wait until this summer. They'll turn around. They'll see 1 or 2 additional assets that another team has that Miami doesn't, and then they'll go with their sweepstakes. And it's like, at that point, why are you throwing Miami's name around? So, yes, and I know I'm kind of using this to harp on the fact that I'm obviously upset that the whole Antetokounmpo sweepstakes didn't work out. What's more upsetting and why I am talking in this way, you didn't go after anybody. That is pathetic. That is absolutely pathetic to make no trades. Diving into the big one, obviously missing out on Giannis Antetokounmpo was kind of the highlight of the first block. This sucks. But really, I think when you kind of at least look at some of the reports that had come out, I wouldn't say you can, really be, I mean, obviously we're not going to know completely what happened behind closed doors. But the reporting from Barry Jackson at least made it seem like Miami gave it the good old college try to win the Giannis Antetokounmpo sweepstakes. Barry Jackson reported, Miami went all in on Giannis, made everyone but Bam available, but it wasn't enough. They decided not to pursue Morant, which I'm going to get into later in this episode. They decided not to pursue Morant, After much discussion, they ultimately stood by their core fundamental principle of not ever giving up on a season and trading players for future picks. they remain hopeful they can make noise in the playoffs. I mean, you're not making noise right now. What noise in the playoffs are you going to make if you don't make any deal at all? It's nice to at least see some reporting from Barry Jackson suggests that Miami did open the floodgates and make that quite available for Milwaukee's liking, with the exception out of Adebayo, because as I've been talking about on the channel for weeks now, I think nobody is safe with the exception of Bam. So to kind of hear at least Miami basically say to Milwaukee, hey, whatever kind of package you want to mock up, go for it, but we're not putting Adebayo on the table. I mean, you gave it your best shot. You gave it your best shot. And I think that's maybe why right now I'm feeling a little bit pessimistic that the future for potentially Miami waiting on Antetokounmpo to maybe join the team over the summer is kind of out of the cards at this point. But we'll just kind of have to wait and see. We'll have you guys up to date with what we know here on the channel. But unfortunately, it's looking like Antetokounmpo is definitely not suiting up in Miami for the rest of this season, but at least isn't going to be taking his talents to South Beach, at least at this point in time. Now, before I get into the nitty-gritty surrounding Ja Morant and that kind of situation, because it's not really a whole lot messier, or it's just not majorly different, I feel like, from Giannis. Kind of, sort of. It is in some ways. I'm going to get into that before we give a shout out here to our sponsor of today's video, that being Underdog Fantasy. Fast breaks, buzzer beaters, and block parties are back, and Underdog is the best place to get in on all the action. Now, playing on Underdog is easy. Just pick whether your favorite players will go higher or lower on stats like points, rebounds, steals, and more. Get your picks right and you can win up to 5,000 times your cash. This week on Underdog, I'm looking at tonight's matchup for Miami as they're taking on the Boston Celtics. For the Miami Heat, I'm selecting Bam Adebayo for higher than 18.5 points and Jaylen Brown for higher than 25.5 points. Download the app today and use promo code BASKETBALLFAN to score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. That's promo code BASKETBALLFAN, and it's all on Underdog. Make picks, win money. Now, my guy Norman Powell has been out the last 3 games due to a sore back, but the last game he had played, looking back at his last 5 games, was the first of 3 against Chicago, where he did have a 21-point showing. With this kind of in mind, going into tonight's matchup against Boston, I'm hopeful that Powell will be able to be back in the lineup for Miami. At least from what I've been seeing in the reports so far, it looks like he is going to be ready to suit up and play. So that's very promising, but I'm hoping that they are not just rushing him back to the court ultimately for Miami, because, I mean, right now, at least with how they're sitting, they're probably going to finish the season in some capacity in the play-in tournament range. So they'll probably end up playing Atlanta or Chicago again, hopefully not replicating what we had seen in the loss. I believe it was on Tuesday. I'm getting all my days mixed up a little bit. But Atlanta had their way kind of with Miami in the majority of that game. And that was, quite honestly, pretty pathetic to watch, considering Heat using that opportunity to celebrate Miami's first championship team back in 2006. So, I mean, hey, if you got Norman Powell taking the court healthy against a pretty strong Boston Celtics team, definitely would select higher in points per usual, but then selecting lower in rebounds and assists also definitely warranted. As you could see from Powell's last matchup, 0 rebounds and 1 assist, so at least keeping that part of his game pretty consistent in the grand scheme of things. So I think, obviously, my guy Powell is a bucket. I would be surprised if he was, if he was lower than on points per game, or if he was lower in points in terms of selecting that pick. But, if he's still kind of at least shaking the rust off from his injury a little bit, he might be lower than 20.5 points in this matchup against Boston. Boston's a very competitive team, obviously. I feel like that is, kind of a given. But in terms of picks I would make for Powell going into tonight's matchup against the Boston Celtics, I'd select higher for points, and then I'd select lower for rebounds and assists per usual. Drop in the comments what you guys think and what picks you're making going into this matchup against the Boston Celtics. But I think my guy Norman Powell won't miss a beat. Will come back into this matchup looking like the stud he's been this season. And again, congratulations to him for making his first All-Star selection. So it'll be exciting to see him suit up in that game as well. Again, you can enjoy all the action like this here over on Underdog Fantasy. Make picks, win money.
Must be 18 plus. 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska. 19 plus in Colorado for some games. 21 plus in Arizona, Massachusetts, and Virginia. And present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. See assets.underdogfantasy.com/play and get terms DFSTML for details. Offer not valid in Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In New York, call the 24/7 helpline at 1-878 or text HOMI 467-369.
Well, I had mentioned on the channel here a solid plan B for Miami to entertain could definitely be if they didn't win the Giannis Antetokounmpo sweepstakes to maybe see if they could get Ja Morant for a bag of chips. Well, looked like that bag of chips was just about empty, or at least Memphis wasn't willing to give him up for a bag of chips, or at least in some sort of or at least something to compare it to being the type of trade we saw Trae Young go to Washington for. There were discussions surrounding Miami about potentially going for Morant, but ultimately it seemed like the decision came about that the organization did not want to go forward with acquiring Morant. Now, some of the reports I saw said the Heat discussed Morant internally, but decided not to pursue a trade because of the two biggest factors being, one, his contract, and two, his history of injuries, which I think are very fair considering the entire scope of what you are signing up for when you are signing Ja Morant to your basketball team. I think consistently he hasn't been able to stay healthy, which has been a major problem we've seen from Tyler Hero, which is probably the role he would be replacing coming into this team, obviously with Hero probably heading out in that case scenario. And then the contract is arguably even worse than Hero's situation. I mean, Morant, I believe, is making $10 million more, and you'd pretty much have to shoe yourself into that contract, I believe, for one more year if you go with bringing in Morant. And then that's not even a 100% guarantee he's going to come back and maybe even play better than Hero is right now. Because if you compare both players right now, they're both pretty even. If anything, I would say Hero's been a more efficient player shooting-wise this season than Ja Morant. Definitely not looking like the all-NBA talent we had seen from him back just a few seasons prior. So I can't blame Miami for not wanting to take a chance on Ja and ultimately deciding to steer clear. But I think those two reasons specifically are the best reasons for Miami to want to avoid that at all costs. So going off of plan B not working, going off of plan A not work, or plan A and B both not work, or both not coming to fruition for Miami, which again, can't say I'm surprised. Miami always being thrown in the conversation to acquire a superstar and they never actually do it. There was no plan C though either. So the question for me is, how does Miami move forward from this? They didn't make any effort to try to, see what they could get for Andrew Wiggins. Norman Powell, I would have maybe suggested don't do that. Even Simone Fontecchio and a couple of draft picks. It's kind of like a now what scenario. So I think at this point, Miami has settled on being mid for the rest of this season. They've settled on probably, at best, another 7th seed finish. They'll probably end up in the 8th seed, depending on how the play-in shakes up. And hopefully, they'll lose in less than 5 games to the Detroit Pistons in the first round. That's what I think is going to happen. But I think in terms of how Miami moves forward here, they've got to just, find a way to make the synergy of the roster they have right now work a little bit better. I don't want to say Hero or Powell should come off the bench because both of them arguably are the best offensive threat Miami has right now. if you can find a way to make both of them work in the starting lineup, l'chaim. I mean, both are like together defensively are not doing this roster any favors. I think you've got to just find a way to get the overall strong group of guys you have right now together to play like a team. Because if you make it a scenario where Norman Powell's got to carry a bunch of the load offensively or Hero, the team is just not going to play how they did in the beginning of the year, which if they could find a way to do that, I definitely think could maybe punch their ticket to the semifinals or the conference finals. A little bit optimistic, but definitely that semifinal round if we're looking at a Miami Heat team we had saw in the beginning of the season. So I think now is just the time to try to leverage why Tyler Hero would be a good all-star for another team to maybe want to trade for in the offseason. Because if Tyler Hero comes back and plays out the rest of the season well, he's going to want a lot of money in that extension that I am pretty sure Miami would not be willing to pay him at this point in time. But if you're looking at a scenario where he's not healthy, that's also a tough situation where can we avoid the bag of chips for Tyler Hero scenario? Drop in the comments what you guys think and what Miami needs to do to position themselves to be in a good position to maybe acquire a superstar like Antetokounmpo in the offseason, or what some of their players need to do in terms of if Miami is going to leverage them or find a way to configure them for a superstar's liking over the course of this summer. That's going to do it for this Friday's episode of your Heat Latest on FanArc. Don't forget to drop a like on this video, and if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. We're almost at 600 subscribers, so if you want to help us get closer to that goal, punch that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks again so much for joining us. I'm Sam Shapiro. Have a great weekend.